The minimalist movement has been really inspiring to me, and a couple of months ago I made a video about how it has really influenced my relationship with my stuff, and particularly to my clothes. But as I said in that video, I've never really considered myself to be a minimalist because I've held on to a lot of stuff that kind of feels very valuable to me, like books and stuff for my altar and things like that. And I kind of have always felt like I haven't gotten rid of enough stuff to be considered a minimalist, that my lifestyle isn't minimalist enough, even though I've been so influenced by it. I touched more on the kind of ethical and environmental side of things in that video and how valuable I think that minimalism is to that. But recently I've been thinking a little bit more about why I feel so drawn to minimalism, despite not feeling like a minimalist, and thinking about what I've gained from it personally, especially kind of on a psychological and spiritual level. And after thinking about it for a little bit, I realized that I think what I've gained most from the minimalist movement is a higher level of intention, you know, in my day-to-day life and across my whole life trajectory. In order to minimalize any area of your life, you really have to ask yourself a lot of questions about what you really want to prioritize in your life and what really matters to you and what really doesn't matter to you, in order to make those decisions about, you know, what you want to keep in your life and what you don't. And this has huge benefits just in terms of helping you to get rid of all of the extraneous stuff and saving you money and creating a sort of calmer and just more easy environment for you to live in. But I've also found that making these decisions on a seemingly small level, like about your books and your clothes and all of your miscellaneous stuff, it really has repercussions on a higher level. So you start to think about things in that kind of way, about much bigger picture questions in your life, and you start to really engage with the question of what you prioritize and what has meaning for you and what you care about in the big picture stuff, which is a really, really important kind of switch. It's a really important shift to make into that kind of headspace. I believe that I first encountered the concept of minimalism back in 2011 or 2012 through a kind of witchy pagan YouTuber who was basically Marie Kondoing her entire home, her entire life. And it was around the time that I was kind of first exploring spirituality again, that I was first kind of starting to kind of dip my toe back into that water. And I actually really think that encountering this idea, encountering this way of thinking about the stuff that you have in your life and that you consume and you bring into it, and being critical about that and being reflective on that, actually really played a big part in inspiring me to think about the big picture ideas relating to spirituality, and really wanting to reflect and celebrate that in a tangible way, and really starting to kind of think about the way that I was consuming and that I was bringing things into my life and holding on to certain things in my life, certain physical, tangible, material things. It really made me think about kind of the meaning of my life more generally on a bigger scale, and made me really want to make more space for meaningfulness in my life, because once I started to realize that certain kind of physical material objects in my life didn't hold meaning to me, I started to question that on a bigger scale. I started to wonder about, you know, what on a broader level I wanted to take out of life, and what were the things that I actually thought could create a meaningful life for a person on this earth, and what were the things that, because I was getting too wrapped up in, you know, material things and too wrapped up in all of this stuff and constantly wanting to buy new things and incorporate new things into my life and just getting bogged down in that, what was I missing out on, and what were the things that I'd really lost sight of? And yeah, introducing this idea into my life of only holding on to, or only introducing things into your life that you actually really care about and that actually spark joy in you, made me ask myself, what about the habits that I have, and what about the projects that I'm working on, and my college degrees and my career plan? Do those things actually spark any joy in me, or have I done them because they're easy? or because I think I'm good at them, or because I think that they'll bring me stability, and so on. And I really started to realize that I was kind of living on autopilot, and that I hadn't really been kind of making room for these big questions. And I kind of almost didn't want to think about big questions like spirituality and the nature of existence, because that would kind of mean that I would have to look at my life as a whole, you know? Like, I think sometimes we use our consumerism and we use our relationship with stuff and our blindness to whether or not we actually care about any of it almost as kind of blinkers. Like, we just blinker ourselves from the bigger picture of our lives, because, you know, we're afraid of regret. We're afraid of feeling like we have just wasted time, we've wasted money, we've wasted resources on all of this stuff. And we're afraid of what we might see, I think, sometimes, if we actually take that away and look at the stark and harsh reality of what our life really is. If you're just sitting alone in a room with no stuff and nothing to distract you, how do you feel? How do you feel in yourself? Do you feel like you're living a meaningful life? And if not, what on earth can you do about that? And that, for me, is what living intentionally really is. Because once you start to question yourself about what you find meaningful and start accepting that you want to inject meaningfulness into your life, you really start to be intentional about everything that you do and everything that you bring into your life as a whole. And you allow yourself to think about that and to think about how meaningful the different things in your life are. Intentional living for me is not just about living ethically as much as possible, you know, living in a way that reflects my ethics as much as possible. It's also about spending as much as possible of my day and my week and my year taking actions that are moving me towards the things that I find meaningful. And this can be lots of different things. Like, I find my friendships meaningful, and in particular, I find certain friendships meaningful. So living intentionally for me can be about making sure that I'm spending time with those friends, and maybe spending, you know, an extra amount of time, making sure I make special time for those friends whose friendship feels particularly meaningful, that we have particularly deep conversations, that we have a particularly strong bond, that we relate to each other on a really deep kind of way, and that maybe we can talk to each other about these kinds of things. So yeah, intentional living to me is about making space for that. I feel like after all of these years of being more intentional in my life in general, I know now what my primary goals are in terms of my creative output and in terms of my kind of career path. And so, you know, I make time for those goals. I make time for those projects. And I know that I want to be living in a way that kind of reflects my beliefs in a sacred cosmos. And so I make time and space for that too. I make time and space for spiritual practices that express that express the meaning that I find through philosophies like pantheism, through practices like paganism and earth-based spirituality. This process has really, really shown me how valuable those kinds of ideas are to me and to my life, and how much they reflect the ways that I find meaning in the world. So if you haven't asked yourself this already, maybe it's time to ask the question, am I living intentionally? How much of what I do and what I bring into my life is done in a meaningful way, and how much of it brings meaning and incorporates meaning into my everyday life and into the kind of overall trajectory of my life in general? Because it's been a really, really useful way of thinking for me, and it's just made me a much, much happier, contented person.